The shrill ring of Eliza Winter's phone cut through the backstage chatter at Lincoln Center. She glanced at the caller ID. Mom. Unusual for Catherine to call right before a performance. Eliza, you need to come home. Her mother's voice cracked. Now. For hours later, Eliza stood before the imposing Beacon Hill townhouse she'd grown up in, her cello case heavy in one hand, weekend bag in the other. The October wind whipped her dark hair across her face as she climbed the familiar marble steps. Margaret, their housekeeper for 20 years, opened the door before Eliza could ring the bell. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her normally immaculate uniform wrinkled. "Thank God you're here, Miss Eliza," she whispered. "Your parents are in the study with Mr. Hoffman." The family attorney's presence confirmed Eliza's fears. Something was terribly wrong. The study door stood ajar. Inside, her father, the renowned neurosurgeon whose steady hands had saved countless lives, sat slumped in his leather chair, looking decades older than his 62 years. Her mother perched on the armrest beside him, her arthritic hand resting on his shoulder. "Dad," Eliza's voice came out smaller than intended. Dr. Jonathan Winters looked up, his face ashen. "I'm ruined, sweetheart." Robert Hoffman, silver-haired and grave, nodded at Eliza. "Perhaps you should sit." Eliza remained standing. "What happened?" "Harold Blackwood died on my operating table 3 days ago." Her father's voice was hollow. "A cerebral aneurysm, complex, but within my expertise. I followed protocol to the letter, but he didn't make it. And now his son is crucifying your father," her mother added, her voice bitter. "Nathaniel Blackwood is using every resource at his disposal to destroy our family." Blackwood. The name registered immediately. Blackwood Innovations was a tech empire, its founder a legend, its current CEO a reclusive genius rumored to be as brilliant as he was ruthless. "What's happening exactly?" Hoffman cleared his throat. "The Blackwood family is filing both criminal and civil suits against your father. Medical malpractice, negligence, potentially even criminal negligence. They've frozen your parents' assets pending investigation." "That's absurd," Eliza protested. "Dad's record is impeccable." "The evidence suggests otherwise," Hoffman said carefully. "There appear to be inconsistencies in the surgical records, medication logs." "Fabricated," Dr. Winters interjected. "Someone tampered with my notes." Catherine Winters dabbed at her eyes. "The hospital has suspended Jonathan pending investigation. My experimental arthritis treatment has been canceled. Apparently, our insurance coverage has been questioned." "How bad is it financially?" Eliza asked, her mind racing. "We're facing a $30 million civil suit," her father said flatly. "The house is mortgaged to the hilt from your education and your mother's medical expenses. If I lose my license." The unspoken conclusion hung in the air. "Mr. Blackwood has requested a meeting tomorrow morning," Hoffman added. "At Blackwood Tower." He indicated he might be open to discussing alternatives to litigation. "I won't beg," Dr. Winters said, his voice suddenly firm. "I did nothing wrong." "You won't beg," Eliza agreed. "But I'll be there." That night, unable to sleep, Eliza researched Nathaniel Blackwood. 35 years old. MIT graduate at 19. Took over the family business after his father's unexpected death. Expanded Blackwood Innovations from medical technology into artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and private space exploration. Estimated net worth, $11.6 billion. And not a single personal detail beyond that. No scandals. No relationships documented by the press. Just work and more work. The man was an enigma wrapped in stock options and titanium. The next morning, Eliza chose her outfit carefully. A charcoal pencil skirt, ivory blouse, and the pearl earrings her grandmother had given her for graduation. Professional, not provocative. Dignified, not desperate. Blackwood Tower sliced through the Boston skyline like an obsidian blade. In the lobby, a security officer checked their IDs before directing them to a private elevator that whisked them to the top floor without stopping. The elevator doors opened directly into a vast office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A man stood silhouetted against the panoramic view, his back to them. "Dr. and Mrs. Winters," he said without turning. "Punctuality. At least one professional standard remains intact." When he finally faced them, Eliza was struck by how young he appeared despite the silver at his temples. His eyes were a startling ice blue, his features sharp and aristocratic. He wore his bespoke suit like armor. Those cold eyes flicked over Eliza as if she were an unexpected variable in an equation. And you must be the daughter, the cellist from Juilliard. Eliza Winters, she replied, extending her hand. And you're the man attempting to destroy my family based on fabricated evidence. A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps, crossed his face before his expression settled back into impassivity. He ignored her hand. Please sit. He gestured to the conference table, where folders lay precisely arranged. We have a great deal to discuss. For 40 minutes, Nathaniel Blackwood methodically outlined the case against Dr. Winters. Altered records, omitted warnings about surgical risks, improper post-operative medication protocols. With each accusation, Eliza watched her father shrink further into himself. This is absurd, she finally interrupted. My father has dedicated his life to medicine. His ethical standards are beyond reproach. Ethics, Blackwood repeated, the word dripping with contempt. A convenient shield for incompetence. You arrogant, her father began, half rising. Jonathan, Catherine placed a restraining hand on her husband's arm. Please. What do you want, Mr. Blackwood? Eliza asked, meeting his gaze directly. You didn't invite us here simply to outline allegations your lawyers could have communicated. Nathaniel set down the folder he'd been referencing. You're correct, Miss Winters. I have a proposition. He walked to the window again, hands clasped behind his back. I require a wife. The declaration hung in the air like a thunderclap. I beg your pardon. Catherine Winters finally managed. The board of directors, our shareholders, they value stability, continuity, a family legacy for Blackwood Innovations. His tone was coldly analytical. I have neither the time nor the inclination for conventional courtship. He turned, his gaze fixing on Eliza. In exchange for marriage to your daughter, I am prepared to withdraw all charges against Dr. Winters, assume your family's debts, and ensure Mrs. Winters receives the experimental treatment she requires. This is outrageous. Dr. Winters exploded, surging to his feet. We're not in the Middle Ages. You can't simply purchase a human being. I'm offering a mutually beneficial arrangement, Blackwood corrected. 1 year of marriage, after which your daughter will receive $5 million and her freedom, should she desire it. Your family's financial and legal problems disappear, and she secures her future. And if we refuse? Eliza asked quietly. Blackwood's smile never reached his eyes. Then I will pursue every legal avenue available to ensure your father faces the maximum penalties for his negligence. Criminal charges, civil damages, the destruction of his reputation and legacy. He looked at his watch. I'll give you 24 hours to consider my offer. My assistant will show you out. As they rode the elevator down in stunned silence, Eliza's mind raced. This wasn't a proposal. It was extortion dressed as salvation. Later that night, watching her mother struggle to open a pill bottle with her deformed fingers, listening to her father's muffled sobs from the study, Eliza made her decision. The next morning, she returned to Blackwood Tower alone. I accept, she said as she stepped into Nathaniel Blackwood's office. With conditions of my own. Nathaniel Blackwood's expression remained impassive as Eliza delivered her terms. She'd spent the night preparing, anticipating this moment with the same focus she brought to difficult musical passages. First, complete immunity for my father, legal and professional. All evidence against him disappears permanently. Blackwood nodded once. Easily arranged. Second, my mother's treatment continues at the best facility, fully covered. Consider it done. Third, Eliza continued, I maintain my musical career. Any public appearances as your wife will work around my performance schedule, not the other way around. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. Acceptable, within reason. Fourth, we will have separate bedrooms. This arrangement is a business transaction, not a marriage in any true sense. For the first time, Blackwood smiled, a sharp, humorless curve of his lips. Of course, though for appearance's sake, discretion would be appreciated. Eliza took a deep breath. And finally, at the end of 1 year, I walk away with not only the $5 million you offered, but also a signed confession regarding any tampering with my father's records. Blackwood's eyes narrowed dangerously. You presume. I presume nothing, she interrupted. If you're innocent of manipulation, writing the statement costs you nothing. If you're guilty, consider it insurance for my silence about the true nature of our arrangement. A tense silence filled the office. Outside the vast windows, clouds darkened the Boston skyline, promising rain. "You're more formidable than I anticipated, Miss Winters," he finally said, his tone almost approving. "My legal team will draw up the papers. We'll be married within the week." 1 month, Eliza countered. "I need time to withdraw from Juilliard properly and inform my quartet." 2 weeks, he compromised. "And the ceremony happens at my estate in Newport. Small, private, but legally binding." She extended her hand. "Deal." This time he took it. His grip was firm, his palm surprisingly warm against her cold fingers. "Welcome to the Blackwood family, Eliza," he said, his eyes unreadable. "I trust neither of us will regret this arrangement." The engagement was announced the next day. By afternoon, Eliza's phone exploded with messages from friends and colleagues, ranging from congratulations to concerned confusion. How had she, a dedicated musician with no interest in the corporate world, captured the attention of America's most eligible bachelor? The story fed to the press. A whirlwind romance that began when they met at a charity gala felt hollow even as she repeated it. Her parents' reaction proved more complicated. Her father, initially furious, eventually surrendered to the reality that his daughter had sacrificed herself for the family's survival. Her mother alternated between guilt and cautious optimism. "Perhaps it won't be as cold as you fear," Catherine suggested one evening as they sorted through Eliza's apartment, deciding what would move to Newport. "Arranged marriages have succeeded throughout history." "This isn't arranged, Mom. It's coerced," Eliza corrected, carefully wrapping her favorite recording of Yo-Yo Ma. "And I harbor no illusions about Nathaniel Blackwood's capacity for emotional connection." The wedding preparations moved with military precision. Blackwood's team of planners materialized at Eliza's apartment with fabric swatches, floral arrangements, and dress options. She selected the simplest designs, refusing to pretend this was a celebration of love. The night before the ceremony, a package arrived at her parents' home, where she'd been staying. Inside lay a velvet box containing a diamond ring that could only be described as ostentatious, clearly chosen for its monetary value rather than any consideration of her taste. Beneath it sat a handwritten note. "For tomorrow. The press will expect it." No signature, no sentiment. Eliza slipped the ring onto her finger, its weight unfamiliar and burdensome. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself, a woman sold into a modern form of servitude, all in the name of family loyalty. The wedding day dawned clear and cool. The Blackwood estate in Newport sprawled across manicured grounds overlooking the Atlantic, the Victorian mansion rising like something from another century. Inside, a small gathering awaited in the private chapel, mostly Blackwood executives and legal representatives, with her parents the only guests from her side. As she walked down the short aisle in a simple ivory-sheathed dress, Eliza fixed her gaze on Nathaniel. He stood straight-backed and solemn, watching her approach with an expression she couldn't decipher. Not desire, certainly. Perhaps satisfaction at a business transaction nearly complete. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of traditional vows that felt like perjury on her lips. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Nathaniel brushed his lips against hers in the briefest possible kiss, a performance for their minimal audience. The reception that followed was equally perfunctory. A catered lunch in the mansion's dining room, where Nathaniel kept her firmly by his side, his hand occasionally resting at the small of her back when staff approached. To outsiders, they might have appeared like any newlywed couple. Only Eliza felt the careful calculation in each touch, each smile. As evening fell, the few guests departed. Her parents embraced her tightly, her mother's tears dampening her shoulder. "You can always come home," her father whispered fiercely. "Whatever happens, whenever you need." Eliza nodded, not trusting herself to speak. When the door closed behind them, the vast mansion seemed to shrink around her, suddenly oppressive in its silence. "I'll show you to your room," Nathaniel said, breaking the quiet. "Your belongings have been unpacked." He led her up a grand staircase to the east wing, stopping before an ornate door. The bedroom beyond was beautiful in a museum-like way. Antique furniture, silk draperies, a four-poster bed that dominated the space. "My room connects through there." He indicated a door in the far wall, but it remains locked from both sides. "Your privacy is assured." "Thank you," she managed, unsure what else to say to the stranger who was now legally her husband. Dinner will be served at 7. He continued, businesslike. Martha, the housekeeper, will assist with anything you need. As he turned to leave, Eliza found her voice. What exactly am I supposed to do here, Nathaniel? Besides exist as your ornamental wife when required. He paused, regarding her with mild surprise. Whatever you wish. The music room in the West Wing has been prepared for your practice. The library contains first editions you might find interesting. The grounds are extensive if you enjoy walking. A gilded cage is still a cage. Something flashed in his eyes, annoyance, perhaps, or recognition. We made a deal, Eliza. 1 year. I'd suggest making the best of it. With that, he was gone, leaving her alone in a room that, despite its luxury, felt nothing like home. Dinner proved uncomfortable. Seated at opposite ends of a table designed for 20, they exchanged minimal conversation about the estate's history, the weather forecast, neutral topics that required no emotional investment. Halfway through the meal, Nathaniel's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression tightening. I apologize. There's a situation at our Cambridge facility that requires my attention. On your wedding night. The words escaped before she could stop them. He regarded her with a raised eyebrow. I believe we established the nature of this marriage. Business comes first. She nodded, oddly relieved at the prospect of solitude. Of course. I'll return tomorrow evening, he said, rising. Feel free to explore the estate. Charles and Martha will attend to your needs. After he left, Eliza wandered the mansion's empty hallways, feeling like a ghost haunting someone else's home. In the music room, she found her cello carefully positioned near a window with perfect afternoon light. At least this part of her life remained her own. She practiced until her fingers ached, losing herself in Bach's cello suites until exhaustion finally overcame her. Returning to her bedroom, she stood before the connecting door, wondering about the man on the other side. What drove someone like Nathaniel Blackwood to such extremes? Why arrange a loveless marriage when surely women would line up voluntarily for his wealth and position? These questions followed her into uneasy dreams, where she stood on stage before a critical audience of one, a blue-eyed judge who found her perpetually lacking. Miles away in Boston, Nathaniel Blackwood sat in his office, reviewing security footage of the mansion. On the monitor, Eliza moved through the halls, her posture betraying her discomfort in her new surroundings. He watched her enter the music room, saw her transformation as she began to play, the tension melting away, replaced by focused passion. He switched off the monitor and turned to the window, gazing at the city lights below. Phase 1 of his plan was complete. The daughter of Jonathan Winters was now legally bound to him, an elegant form of justice for his family's suffering. So why did victory taste so hollow? 3 days after the wedding, Nathaniel returned to Newport. Eliza had settled into a routine of solitude, practicing her cello in the mornings, exploring the extensive grounds in the afternoons, and reading in the library during evenings. The staff maintained a respectful distance, appearing only when needed and vanishing just as quickly. She was in the library when she heard the front door open, followed by the low murmur of voices in the foyer. Setting aside a first edition of Thoreau, she smoothed her dress and steeled herself for another performance in their charade of matrimony. Nathaniel stood speaking with Charles, still wearing his overcoat, his hair slightly disheveled from the coastal wind. When he turned and saw her, something flickered across his face, not quite a smile, but a softening of his usual mask. "You're back," she said, stating the obvious. The Cambridge situation took longer than anticipated. He handed his coat to Charles. "I trust you've been comfortable." "The prison accommodations are excellent," she replied with cool sarcasm. The corner of his mouth twitched. "Perhaps we could discuss your incarceration over dinner? I've asked Mrs. Peterson to prepare something special." The something special turned out to be a formal dinner in the main dining room. Candles illuminated the space, casting warm light across sterling silver and fine china. A bottle of champagne chilled in a silver bucket between them. "Are we celebrating something?" Eliza asked as Charles poured the champagne. "Our wedding dinner," Nathaniel replied. "Since the actual day was interrupted." She raised an eyebrow. "You mean when you abandoned me immediately after the ceremony?" "Business necessities," he said without apology, lifting his glass. "To new beginnings." Eliza reluctantly touched her glass to his. "To contractual obligations." If her pointed response bothered him, he didn't show it. Throughout dinner, he asked about her musical background, listening with unexpected attentiveness as she described her journey from child prodigy to Juilliard graduate. "I heard you perform once," he admitted as dessert was served. "Bach's Cello Suite No. 1 in G major. 2 years ago at Lincoln Center." Eliza paused, recalling the performance. "That was a student showcase. Why would you attend something so academically focused?" "Blackwood Innovations funds arts education," he answered, his expression unreadable. "I was evaluating potential grant recipients." The explanation made logical sense, yet something about his careful tone suggested there was more to the story. After dinner, he suggested a walk through the conservatory, a Victorian glass structure attached to the east wing, filled with exotic plants and small fountains. The space felt otherworldly in the moonlight, humid and alive compared to the mansion's formal sterility. "This was my mother's creation," Nathaniel said, touching the leaf of a rare orchid. She found New England winters unbearable after growing up in Southern California. It was the first personal detail he'd volunteered, and Eliza found herself hungry for more information about the man who was now her husband in name. "Where is she now?" "She died when I was 20. Cancer." His voice remained even, emotionless. "My father followed 5 years later, the aneurysm that took his life." "I'm sorry," she said genuinely. He nodded once, then changed the subject. "The Boston Symphony is performing Dvorak next weekend. I've arranged box seats, if you're interested." The invitation surprised her. That would be nice. As they returned to the main house, an uncomfortable tension grew between them. The evening had almost felt normal, the kind of dinner two people might share when getting to know each other under ordinary circumstances. But there was nothing ordinary about their situation. "I have documents for you to review tomorrow," Nathaniel said as they reached the staircase. "Public appearances we should consider over the next month. Charity events expected of the Blackwood family." And just like that, the illusion of normalcy shattered. This was still a business arrangement, nothing more. "Of course," she replied, her tone cooling. "I'll look at my performance schedule and coordinate." He walked her to her bedroom door, maintaining a careful distance between them. "Good night, Eliza." "Good night, Nathaniel." Inside her room, she changed into a simple cotton nightgown and sat at the vanity, brushing her hair with mechanical strokes. The woman in the mirror looked back with uncertain eyes. What game was Nathaniel Blackwood playing? The calculated cruelty she'd expected had yet to materialize, replaced instead by a distant politeness that somehow felt equally unsettling. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. When she opened the door, Nathaniel stood there, his formal dinner attire replaced by dark pants and a partially unbuttoned dress shirt. He carried 2 crystal glasses and a bottle of amber liquid. "I thought you might have trouble sleeping," he said. "Your first night here, I noticed the light under your door until dawn." The fact that he'd noticed such a detail surprised her. "Are you monitoring my sleep patterns?" "Merely observing," he replied, holding up the bottle. "May I come in? This is a 30-year-old Macallan that deserves appreciation." Against her better judgment, she stepped aside. He entered, maintaining a respectful distance as he poured 2 fingers of whiskey into each glass. When he handed one to her, their fingers brushed briefly, the contact sending an unexpected jolt through her. "To sleeping better," he said, lifting his glass. She sipped the whiskey, appreciating the complex burn as it slid down her throat. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, neither quite meeting the other's eyes. "Why did you really bring me here tonight, Nathaniel?" He studied his glass. "Contractually, this is our wedding night. Appearances matter. There's no one here to maintain appearances for," she pointed out. "The staff talk. Rumors spread. In high society, perception becomes reality." He took another sip. "If we're to convince the world this marriage is genuine, we must first convince those closest to us." "By sharing whiskey in my bedroom? By behaving like newlyweds who might reasonably want privacy?" The implication hung between them, shifting the atmosphere in the room. Eliza felt her heartbeat quicken despite herself. "I thought we agreed." "We did," he interrupted. "The arrangement stands. But eventually, we'll need to be seen together, to touch occasionally, to appear comfortable in each other's presence. Tonight seemed an appropriate time to establish boundaries." She set down her glass. "And what are those boundaries, exactly?" Nathaniel placed his glass beside hers and stepped closer. "May I?" After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. Slowly, he lifted his hand to her face, his fingers brushing her cheek with unexpected gentleness. His touch was warm, slightly calloused, the hands of someone who had worked with more than just keyboards and contracts. "Public displays of affection will be necessary," he said quietly. "Nothing excessive. A touch here." His fingers trailed down to her shoulder. A look there. His eyes held hers with unsettling intensity. Small gestures that appear natural. Eliza forced herself to remain still, fighting the instinct to step away, or worse, step closer. "Is this how you rehearse all your business deals, Mr. Blackwood?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Only the most important ones." He stepped back, retrieving his glass. "We should both get some rest. The legal team is arriving tomorrow with the quarterly disclosure documents that need your signature." Just like that, the moment broke. Nathaniel Blackwood, businessman, replaced whatever glimpse of the man beneath she might have witnessed. "Of course," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Business first." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Eliza, I don't view you as merely a transaction. You've shown remarkable courage and loyalty to your family. Those are qualities I respect." Before she could formulate a response, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Eliza sat on the edge of her bed, the whiskey forgotten. Respect wasn't exactly the foundation for a marriage, even a fake one. But it was more than she'd expected from Nathaniel Blackwood. In his own room, Nathaniel stood at the window overlooking the moonlit grounds. The encounter had not gone as planned. He'd intended a simple establishment of ground rules for their public appearances, clinical, pragmatic, emotionless. Instead, something unexpected had occurred when he touched her face. She was beautiful. He'd known that from the first time he saw her perform, her body swaying with the cello as if they were one entity. But beauty was commonplace in his world, a currency traded as readily as stock options. It shouldn't affect him, especially not with her. He poured another finger of whiskey, contemplating the amber liquid. Phase 2 would be more complicated than anticipated. The careful distance he'd maintained from emotional entanglements for years was essential to his plans. Sentiment was weakness. His father had taught him that lesson repeatedly. And yet, the slight tremor he'd felt in Eliza's shoulder beneath his fingertips lingered like an echo. The vulnerability in her eyes contradicted the steel in her spine when she'd confronted him in his office. Nathaniel Blackwood didn't believe in complications, only variables to be controlled. Eliza Winters was proving to be a variable that required careful recalibration. 2 months into their arrangement, Eliza and Nathaniel settled into a rhythm. Weekdays, he worked in Boston, returning to Newport for weekends filled with carefully orchestrated public appearances, charity galas, symphony performances, corporate dinners where they played the devoted couple with increasing proficiency. Their private interactions remained formal but thawed gradually. Nathaniel showed unexpected consideration for her musical career, arranging transportation to rehearsals and adjusting his schedule around her performances. For her part, Eliza found herself studying him during unguarded moments. The rare genuine smile when something amused him, the intensity in his eyes when discussing technological innovations, the way his shoulders tensed when certain topics arose. One rainy Tuesday with Nathaniel in Boston, Eliza explored the mansion's rarely used east wing. Most doors opened to reveal guest rooms or storage, but one remained stubbornly locked. Something about this door, unadorned compared to the others, almost deliberately inconspicuous, heightened her curiosity. That evening, she casually asked Martha about it while the housekeeper delivered tea. "That room is private, Mrs. Blackwood," Martha replied, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Blackwood doesn't permit anyone to enter, not even his wife." Eliza pressed. Martha's discomfort was palpable. "Especially not family, ma'am." The following day, Eliza searched the library. Behind a collection of Shakespeare's works, she found a small key taped inside the cover of Romeo and Juliet. The irony wasn't lost on her. With the mansion staff occupied preparing for a weekend fundraiser, Eliza returned to the mysterious door. The key slid in perfectly, turning with a soft click. The room beyond startled her. Unlike the mansion's dark woods and rich colors, this space was all whites and creams, sunlight streaming through sheer curtains. Medical equipment lined one wall, now unplugged but clearly once operational. Photographs covered another wall, a progression showing a young red-haired girl, perhaps 16, in various stages of illness. Her name was Sophia. Eliza whirled around. Martha stood in the doorway, her face a mixture of resignation and sadness. Mr. Blackwood's sister, the housekeeper continued. She died here 7 years ago. I didn't know Nathaniel had a sister. Few people do. Mr. Blackwood prefers it that way. Martha stepped into the room, straightening a photograph with practiced ease. She had Eisenmenger syndrome, a heart condition that went undiagnosed until too late. He brought her here for her final months, converted this room into a private hospital suite. Martha's eyes grew distant. I've worked for the Blackwoods since before Mr. Nathaniel was born. I've never seen him as he was with Sophia. Gentle, patient, devastated. What happened? Eliza asked softly. The doctors missed her condition for years. By the time a specialist correctly diagnosed her, the damage was irreversible. Martha's voice hardened. Dr. Jonathan Reynolds was the physician who repeatedly dismissed her symptoms as anxiety. At Boston Memorial Hospital, the same hospital where her father had worked. The connection struck Eliza like physical blow. That's why he targeted my father, she whispered. Revenge against the medical establishment that failed his sister. Mr. Blackwood doesn't discuss it, Martha said, moving toward the door. But yes, I believe his distrust of doctors stems from losing Sophia. You should leave before he returns. He comes here every Friday to change the flowers. That evening, a violent storm hit Newport, matching Eliza's turbulent thoughts. She was in the music room, Bach's-haunting notes flowing from her cello, when she heard the front door slam. Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, soaking wet, his expression thunderous. You entered the room. Eliza set down her bow. Yes. After explicitly being told it was private. No one explicitly told me anything, she countered. And as your wife, even in name only, I have a right to understand why I'm really here. His jaw tightened. Our arrangement was clear. Our arrangement was based on partial truths. Eliza stood. You didn't want justice for your father's death. You wanted revenge against the entire medical profession, starting with my father. Your father represents a system that prioritizes efficiency over accuracy, profits over patience. Nathaniel's voice remained controlled, but barely. A system that killed my sister. My father is nothing like Reynolds. All of them. The entire brotherhood of white coats. They protect each other, excuse each other's mistakes, Nathaniel growled. Your father worked alongside Reynolds for 15 years. Eliza stepped closer. And that justifies fabricating evidence. Destroying an innocent man's reputation? Using his daughter as a pawn in your revenge fantasy. For a moment, raw anguish broke through Nathaniel's composed facade. I held her as she died, he whispered. 19 years old. She made me promise not to hate them, the doctors who failed her. But how could I not? Without thinking, Eliza touched his face, her fingers gentle against his wet cheek. By recognizing that punishing the innocent doesn't honor her memory. Their eyes locked, electricity crackling between them. Then, with a suddenness that startled them both, Nathaniel pulled her against him and kissed her. The kiss was nothing like their chaste wedding peck. This was desperate, hungry, real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, confusion and desire warred in his eyes. This changes nothing, he said, his voice rough. It changes everything, Eliza countered softly. And you know it. He stepped back, running a hand through his wet hair. I need time to think. As Nathaniel disappeared into the dark hallway, Eliza pressed trembling fingers to her lips. Their arrangement had just become infinitely more complicated. April arrived in Newport with an explosion of color across the Blackwood estate. Cherry blossoms lined the driveway, and tulips created vibrant patterns in the formal gardens. Inside the mansion, a similar transformation had occurred in the weeks following Nathaniel and Eliza's kiss. Though neither directly addressed what happened that stormy night, subtle changes marked their interaction. Nathaniel worked from home more frequently, often leaving his office door open when Eliza practiced. They shared meals without the earlier awkward silences, discovering common ground in literature, architecture, and surprisingly, their mutual love of obscure documentaries. Eliza was finishing breakfast on the veranda when Charles approached with the mail. This came for you, Mrs. Blackwood, he said, placing an unmarked envelope on the table. The plain white envelope contained no return address or postage. It had been hand-delivered. Inside, She found a single sheet of paper with words cut from magazines and pasted in an uneven line. He lies. Ask about Project Lazarus. Beneath this cryptic message was a partial photocopy of what appeared to be a medical document bearing her father's signature and the Boston Memorial Hospital letterhead. Eliza's hand trembled as she slipped the letter into her pocket. Throughout the day, the message haunted her. During dinner that evening, she studied Nathaniel's face, searching for signs of the deception the letter suggested. "You're quiet tonight," Nathaniel observed, refilling her wine glass. "Concerned about your upcoming performance?" "Just thinking," she evaded. "Nathaniel, what exactly does Blackwood Innovations develop? Beyond the consumer technology everyone knows about." His expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his eyes. "Various divisions focus on different sectors: renewable energy, transportation, medical technology." "Medical technology," she repeated. "Like what?" "Diagnostic equipment, mostly. Non-invasive scanning technologies. Some experimental treatments." He set down his fork. "Why the sudden interest in corporate specifics?" "Curiosity. We've been married for months, yet I know so little about what you actually do." Nathaniel studied her for a long moment. "There's a facility tour scheduled next month for major shareholders. You could attend, if you're genuinely interested." "I'd like that," she replied, forcing a smile she didn't feel. 3 days later, a second envelope arrived while Eliza rehearsed for an upcoming recital. This one contained a key and an address in South Boston. The message, again assembled from cut-out letters, read, "The truth is here. Come alone." Everything about the situation screamed danger, yet Eliza couldn't ignore it. The following afternoon, she told Martha she was meeting friends in Boston and took a taxi to the address, an aging office building in a commercial district. The key opened a door labeled Archives B on the 3rd floor. Inside, metal filing cabinets lined the walls of the dusty room. Most contained medical malpractice cases dating back decades. After an hour of searching, Eliza found a folder marked Blackwood H. Terminal Procedure. Inside were detailed notes about Harold Blackwood's surgery, including a document authorizing an experimental protocol called Procedure Lazarus for treatment of his aneurysm. Most shocking was the signature at the bottom, not her father's, but Nathaniel's. "I knew you'd figure it out eventually," came a woman's voice from the doorway. Eliza spun around to find an elegant blonde woman watching her with calculated amusement. "Who are you?" "Victoria Hammond," the woman replied, stepping into the room. "Until recently, Nathaniel's fiancée." The revelation hit Eliza like a physical blow. "Fiancé? 5 years together, and he never mentioned me?" Victoria's laugh held no humor. "That's Nathaniel, compartmentalizing his life so nothing interferes with his precious control. What is this place? Why did you bring me here?" "Because you deserve to know what kind of man you married." Victoria moved closer, her expensive perfume overwhelming in the small space. After Sophia died, Nathaniel became obsessed with developing medical technology that could have saved her. Project Lazarus was his brainchild, an experimental neural regeneration technique. She tapped the folder in Eliza's hands. When his father's aneurysm was diagnosed, Nathaniel saw the perfect opportunity to test his procedure. Your father, as chief of neurosurgery, refused to implement the untested protocol, citing ethical concerns. So Nathaniel forged the authorization, Eliza whispered, the pieces falling into place. And when Harold died anyway, Nathaniel needed someone to blame. Victoria's smile was venomous. Your father became the perfect scapegoat. Why tell me this now? Because Nathaniel took everything from me when he ended our engagement to pursue his revenge fantasy. I'm simply returning the favor. Victoria moved toward the door. Oh, and that marriage of yours. It's part of his twisted sense of justice. The daughter of the negligent doctor bound to the Blackwood family, forced to make amends through servitude. She paused in the doorway. Ask him about the weekly visits to the Cambridge lab. Ask why he transferred $8 million to Dr. Maxwell Reynolds, your father's colleague and the current Boston Memorial director. When Victoria left, Eliza sank into a dusty chair, the folder clutched to her chest. Everything, her captivity, her parents' salvation, even the growing connection she'd felt with Nathaniel, suddenly appeared in a sinister new light. During the taxi ride back to Newport, her phone rang repeatedly. Nathaniel. She let it go to voicemail. By evening, storm clouds gathered over the Atlantic, mirroring the tempest brewing inside the Blackwood mansion as Eliza prepared for the confrontation that would either destroy her sham marriage or reveal a truth she wasn't sure she could bear to hear. "It was you all along." Eliza's voice cut through the silence of Nathaniel's study. Rain lashed against the windows as she stood in the doorway, the damning folder clutched in her hand. Nathaniel looked up from his computer, his expression shifting from concern to wariness. "You disappeared for hours. Your phone was off. Answer me." She slammed the folder onto his desk. "You authorized the experimental procedure on your father, not mine. When it failed, you needed someone to blame." His face hardened as he scanned the documents. "Where did you get these? Does it matter? Is it true?" Nathaniel stood slowly, his composure slipping. "It's more complicated than. A simple yes or no will suffice." The silence stretched between them, electric with tension. "Yes," he finally admitted. "I authorized Procedure Lazarus for my father's surgery. And when he died, you fabricated evidence to destroy my father's reputation." Eliza's voice trembled with rage. "You manipulated me, my family, the entire medical board, all to protect yourself." "To protect the project," Nathaniel corrected. "Lazarus could save thousands of lives once perfected. One failed case would have shut everything down." "One failed case?" she repeated incredulously. "That case was your father. Who would have wanted the research to continue?" he insisted. "My father dedicated his life to medical advancement." "And my father? What about his life's work that you destroyed?" Nathaniel ran his hand through his hair, a rare gesture of discomfort. "Your father was a convenient scapegoat. His connection to Reynolds made him the perfect target for my anger after Sophia." "And me?" Eliza asked, her voice dropping dangerously. "Was I just another convenient piece in your revenge game?" His eyes met hers, something vulnerable flickering in their depths. Initially, yes. The admission, though expected, crushed something inside her. "Initially, things changed, Eliza." He moved toward her, stopping when she backed away. "What I feel for you now is real. More real than anything I've felt in years." "How can I possibly believe that?" Tears threatened, but she refused to let them fall. "Our entire relationship is founded on lies." "Not everything was a lie," he insisted. "Not the nights we talked until dawn. Not the way you've made this house feel like a home again. Not the way I feel when you play your cello and think no one is listening." "Stop." She held up her hand. "Just stop. Victoria told me everything." His expression darkened instantly. "Victoria Hammond approached you? Your former fiancée?" "Yes, another detail you conveniently omitted. Our engagement ended over a year ago, when I discovered she was selling company secrets to competitors," Nathaniel said tightly. "Victoria is manipulative and vindictive." "That makes two of you," Eliza shot back. "She also mentioned your weekly trips to Cambridge and payments to Dr. Reynolds." "More secrets, Nathaniel?" His jaw tightened. "The Cambridge facility is where we're developing the next generation of Lazarus technology. The payments to Reynolds were to secure patient trial subjects, completely legal with proper documentation." "Which my father opposed," she guessed. "He refused to participate in ethically questionable trials, so you destroyed him." Nathaniel didn't deny it. Instead, he stepped closer. "I've been wrong, Eliza. About many things. But what's developed between us?" "Is nothing," she interrupted. "A captive developing sympathy for her jailer isn't love, Nathaniel. It's Stockholm Syndrome." His expression hardened. "Is that all this has been to you? How could it be anything else?" Her voice broke. "You bought me to punish my father. You manipulated every aspect of my life. And foolishly, I started to believe there might be a real person behind that calculating facade." She yanked her wedding ring off and placed it on his desk. "I'm leaving. Tonight. The contract is void. You committed fraud from the beginning." "Eliza, please." For the first time since she'd known him, Nathaniel Blackwood looked genuinely afraid. "It's not safe. There's a storm warning. I'd rather take my chances with the weather than spend another minute in this house of lies." She turned toward the door. "Where will you go?" he called after her. "My friend Jessica's cabin in Aspen," she replied without turning. "Far from you and your toxic empire." Within an hour, Eliza had packed essentials and called a car service willing to brave the worsening weather. As she descended the main staircase, Martha waited at the bottom, holding a thick envelope. "Emergency cash and contact numbers," the housekeeper said quietly. "And Miss Eliza? For what it's worth, he's different with you." In all my years with the Blackwoods, I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. That's the problem, Martha, Eliza replied, taking the envelope. I don't know which version of Nathaniel is real anymore. Outside, the rain had turned to sleet. The driver looked nervous as he loaded her bags into the town car. The interstate might close if this turns to snow, ma'am. Just get me to the airport, Eliza insisted. As the car pulled away, she resisted the urge to look back at the mansion. In the study window, Nathaniel's silhouette remained motionless, watching her departure. By the time her flight reached Colorado, a blizzard had descended on the Rockies. The taxi struggled up the mountain road to Jessica's cabin, finally stopping a half-mile short. Can't go further, miss, the driver apologized. Road's not plowed past here. Eliza paid him generously and trudged through knee-deep snow, her city boots woefully inadequate. The cabin, dark and cold, offered little comfort when she finally reached it. Jessica, still traveling in Europe, had left emergency supplies but no firewood. As night fell and temperatures plummeted, Eliza huddled under blankets, her phone dead, the power lines down from the storm. In the howling silence, one thought circled endlessly. She'd escaped one prison only to freeze in another. Meanwhile, in Newport, Nathaniel stared at the radar map showing the Colorado blizzard, an unfamiliar panic rising in his chest. When his attempts to call Eliza failed, he made a decision that would change everything. The temperature in the cabin dropped to dangerous levels by midnight. Eliza's breath formed visible clouds as she paced, trying to maintain circulation. The blizzard had intensified, wind screaming through the gaps in the window frames, snow piling against the doors. Her attempts to light the gas stove had failed. The line appeared frozen. She checked her phone again, still no signal. The isolation that had seemed like salvation hours ago now felt like a death sentence. Wrapped in every blanket she could find, Eliza huddled on the couch, exhaustion finally overcoming her despite the cold. She dreamed of warm hands and blue eyes that changed from ice to ocean depths, of music played by firelight and conversations that stretched until dawn, of a kiss in a storm-darkened room. A thunderous banging jolted her awake. For a moment, she thought the wind had torn something loose from the cabin's exterior. Then she heard it again, deliberate pounding on the front door. Eliza, the voice was barely audible through the howling storm. Eliza, are you in there? Impossible. She stumbled to the door, fingers numb as she fumbled with the lock. Snow blasted into the cabin as she wrenched it open. Nathaniel stood on the porch, nearly unrecognizable. His expensive coat was caked with snow, his face raw from windburn, his usually perfect hair frozen in chaotic spikes. Thank God, he breathed, pushing past her into the cabin. You're alive. Eliza stared at him in disbelief. How did you find me? Your friend Jessica. Called her in Paris when I couldn't reach you. He surveyed the freezing cabin with alarm. We need to get you warm. Now. From his backpack, Nathaniel produced chemical heat packs, activating several and pressing them into her hands. The road is completely blocked. Emergency services can't get through until morning at the earliest. You shouldn't have come, she managed through chattering teeth. Clearly I should have come sooner. He moved efficiently through the cabin, examining the gas line, checking windows. The propane tank outside is buried in snow. I need to clear it and reset the regulator. Before she could protest, he disappeared back into the storm. Eliza clutched the heat packs, bewildered by his appearance and even more by the desperate concern in his eyes. 10 minutes later, he returned, snow melting from his clothes as the heating system rumbled to life. It's working, but the generator's almost out of fuel. There's an emergency tank in the shed that should last the night. He removed his coat, revealing layers of high-performance winter gear. I brought supplies, food, water, satellite phone. How did you get here? She asked, still processing his presence. Helicopter to Aspen, snowmobile as far as it would go, then on foot the last mile. He avoided her eyes, focusing on unpacking provisions. The storm's expected to clear by morning. As the cabin slowly warmed, Eliza watched Nathaniel move with uncharacteristic awkwardness, his usual confidence replaced by something almost like humility. You could have died coming up here, she finally said. You could have died if I hadn't. He handed her a thermal container of hot soup. Drink this. The fragile truce lasted through dinner, rehydrated camping meals that tasted better than any five-star restaurant food to Eliza's hungry body. As color returned to her cheeks, so did her anger. Why are you really here, Nathaniel? To make sure your investment doesn't freeze to death. His jaw tightened. I deserve that. You deserve much worse. I know. He stared into the flames now flickering in the gas fireplace. After you left, I kept thinking about something Sophia said before she died. She made me promise not to let bitterness consume me. I've spent 7 years breaking that promise. The raw honesty in his voice caught her off guard. When I saw the weather reports for Colorado, he continued, I realized I couldn't lose you too. Not because of a contract or an arrangement or even guilt. Because somewhere between all the lies and manipulation, I fell in love with you, Eliza. The declaration hung in the air between them, as fragile and dangerous as thin ice. Love? She repeated, incredulous. You don't even know what that means. I didn't, he admitted. Not until you showed me. By being your prisoner? By challenging me. By seeing through me. By playing Bach at 3 in the morning because you knew I couldn't sleep. His voice roughened. By making me question every decision that led me to this moment. Eliza wrapped her arms around herself, fighting the conflicting emotions his words stirred. Pretty speeches don't undo what you did to my father. To me. No, he agreed. Nothing can undo that. But I've already started to make it right. Her eyes narrowed. What does that mean? Before I left Newport, I sent complete documentation to the medical board clearing your father's name. Copies went to major news outlets with my full confession regarding the fabricated evidence. He met her gaze unflinchingly. By tomorrow, everyone will know the truth. Your reputation doesn't matter, he interrupted. Not compared to this. The satellite phone rang before she could respond. Nathaniel answered, his expression growing serious as he listened. When he hung up, he turned to Eliza with unexpected urgency. We need to leave. Now. The weather's shifting. There's a narrow window to evacuate before the next system hits. But you said morning. The forecast changed. My pilot can reach the clearing a half-mile down, but only if we leave immediately. They bundled up in frantic silence, Eliza accepting the extra layers Nathaniel had brought. Outside, the storm had temporarily calmed, though the snow remained thigh-deep in places. Stay close, Nathaniel instructed, securing a safety line between them. If you fall, I'll pull you up. The journey down the mountain became a blur of exertion and cold. Twice Eliza stumbled, and twice Nathaniel's strong hands steadied her. When they finally reached the clearing, the helicopter's floodlights illuminated the snow-covered landscape like daybreak. As they approached the aircraft, a deafening crack split the air. Eliza looked up to see a massive wall of snow detaching from the ridge above, an avalanche triggered by the helicopter's vibrations. Run! Nathaniel shouted, shoving her toward the helicopter. She scrambled forward, reaching the door as the pilot helped her inside. Turning back, she saw Nathaniel running several yards behind, directly in the avalanche's path. Nathaniel, she screamed. Their eyes met in a moment of perfect clarity before the wall of snow engulfed him. White walls, antiseptic smell, rhythmic beeping of machines. The hospital room in Aspen felt surreal to Eliza as she maintained her vigil at Nathaniel's bedside. 3 days had passed since the rescue team had pulled his unconscious body from the snow, his pulse faint but present. The doctors called his survival miraculous, found in an air pocket, severe hypothermia, but no critical injuries. She hadn't left his side except when forced by medical staff. Something fundamental had shifted in that moment when she'd watched him disappear beneath the avalanche. The complicated tangle of resentment, attraction, and betrayal simplifying into one crystal-clear realization. Despite everything, she couldn't bear to lose him. On the morning of the 4th day, his eyelids finally fluttered open. Recognition dawned slowly in his blue eyes. Eliza? His voice was barely audible, raspy from disuse. I'm here. She leaned forward, relief flooding through her. Don't try to move. You've been unconscious for days. He blinked, processing. The avalanche. You pushed me ahead. You saved my life. She swallowed hard. The rescue team found you buried under 6 feet of snow. Nathaniel attempted to sit up, wincing immediately. The pilot. He's fine. Everyone's fine except you. You stubborn fool. Her voice broke slightly. The doctors say it's a miracle you survived. A ghost of his familiar half-smile touched his lips. Disappointed? Terrified, she corrected softly. I thought I'd lost you. Something vulnerable flickered in his eyes before he looked away. Why stay? After everything. Before she could answer, a nurse entered to check his vitals, followed by doctors who proceeded with examinations and questions. By the time they finished, Nathaniel had drifted back to sleep, the conversation suspended. In the hospital cafeteria later that afternoon, Eliza picked at a sandwich while checking emails on her phone. The story had broken nationally, exactly as Nathaniel had promised. Headlines proclaimed Blackwood CEO admits fraud in medical case, with detailed accounts of how he had falsified evidence against Dr. Winters. Her father had called repeatedly, his voicemails a mixture of confusion and cautious relief. The medical board had already contacted him about reinstating his license. Her mother reported that their assets had been unfrozen, with inexplicable additional funds appearing in their accounts. A new email notification appeared from Charlotte Reed, the private investigator Eliza had impulsively hired after returning to the hospital. She'd asked Charlotte to investigate Victoria Hammond and Dr. Reynolds, hoping to understand the full scope of Nathaniel's deception. The email contained several encrypted attachments and a brief message. Found something you should see immediately. Coming to Aspen. Arriving 4 p.m. At precisely 4 o'clock, a sharp knock came at Nathaniel's hospital room door. Charlotte Reed was a compact woman with silver-streaked dark hair and alert eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Blackwood, she greeted Eliza professionally. Is there somewhere private we can talk? They found an empty consultation room down the hall. Once inside, Charlotte placed a tablet on the table between them. What I found isn't what I expected, she began without preamble. Victoria Hammond and Maxwell Reynolds have been working together for years, long before your husband's father died. Charlotte pulled up financial records showing suspicious transfers between offshore accounts. Hammond worked her way into Nathaniel's life deliberately, on Reynolds' instruction. They've been systematically stealing Blackwood medical research and selling it to competitors. Eliza stared at the evidence, her mind racing. What about my father? The falsified evidence. That part is true. Your husband did fabricate evidence against your father, Charlotte confirmed. But there's more. She swiped to reveal emails between Victoria and Reynolds discussing contingency plans if Nathaniel ever discovered their scheme. They needed to control the narrative about Harold Blackwood's death, Charlotte explained. Your father was becoming suspicious of Reynolds' research practices. They manipulated Nathaniel's grief and guilt over his sister, steering his anger toward your father to prevent him from looking too closely at Reynolds. So Victoria wasn't just a scorned fiancée, Eliza murmured. She was actively working against Nathaniel the entire time. And using you as the final nail in his coffin, Charlotte agreed, pulling up one last document. A detailed plan to expose Nathaniel's fraudulent actions against Dr. Winters, timed precisely to coincide with a hostile takeover attempt by one of Blackwood's competitors. The anonymous letters, Eliza realized. Victoria sent them. Classic manipulation technique, Charlotte nodded. Give you just enough truth to believe the lies mixed in. Eliza's hands trembled as she processed this new reality. I need copies of everything. When she returned to Nathaniel's room, he was awake again, staring out the window at the snow-covered mountains. He turned at her entrance, his expression guarded. I spoke with a private investigator, she said without preamble, placing the tablet on his bed. You should see this. Silently, he reviewed the evidence, his face darkening with each swipe. When he finished, he set the tablet aside, his knuckles white against the hospital sheets. You were investigating me? His voice was carefully neutral. I was seeking the truth, Eliza corrected. All of it, not just the parts that confirmed what I wanted to believe. And what do you believe now? That you did something unforgivable to my father. She met his gaze directly. And that you were also a victim of manipulation by people you trusted. He looked away. That doesn't excuse what I did. No, she agreed. It doesn't. A heavy silence fell between them, filled with unspoken questions. Why did you stay, Eliza? He finally asked, echoing his earlier question. After I was found. Why not just leave? She moved closer to his bedside, choosing her words carefully. When that avalanche hit, nothing else mattered. Not the lies, not the manipulation, not even what you did to my family. All I could think was that I couldn't lose you. His eyes, usually so controlled, revealed raw vulnerability. Even after everything, love isn't rational, Nathaniel. She took his hand, surprising both of them. If it were, I would have walked away and never looked back. I don't deserve your forgiveness. You don't, she agreed. But perhaps we both deserve a chance to build something honest from the ashes of all these lies. He brought her hand to his lips, a gesture of reverence that moved her more than any grand declaration. Where do we go from here? Forward, she said simply. Starting with healing what we've broken. Beginning with my father's reputation. Already done, he replied. But there's more I can do. The foundation in his name, the research grants, they're not just for show, Eliza. They could genuinely advance the field, prevent what happened to Sophia from happening to others. For the first time since discovering his betrayal, Eliza allowed herself to see the wounded, complex man beneath the calculating exterior, a man who had lost his sister, lost his father, and channeled his grief into misguided vengeance. One condition, she said quietly. Complete honesty between us, moving forward. No more secrets, no more hidden agendas. I swear it. He replied, his voice strengthening with conviction. I've lived in shadows for too long. 6 months later, the Blackwood estate in Newport hosted a different kind of gathering. Under a canopy of twinkling lights, the newly established Winters Blackwood Medical Research Foundation celebrated its inaugural grants. Dr. Jonathan Winters, fully reinstated and now leading the foundation's Ethical Oversight Committee, raised a toast to the future of medicine. Across the garden, Eliza watched her husband speaking earnestly with a young researcher whose sister had the same condition that had taken Sophia. The genuine passion in Nathaniel's face as he discussed potential treatments reflected the transformation of these past months. Building trust had not been easy. There had been arguments, painful confessions, moments when the weight of past betrayals threatened to collapse their fragile new foundation. But with each honest conversation, each vulnerable moment shared, something stronger emerged between them. As the evening wound down, Nathaniel found Eliza by the conservatory, where white lilies, Sophia's favorites, filled the air with sweetness. Your father tells me the Reynolds investigation is proceeding well, he said, offering her a glass of champagne. The board expects to revoke his license by month's end. Justice, finally, she murmured. For everyone involved. Nathaniel brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. I received an interesting offer today. A performing arts center in Arizona is looking for a resident cellist and musical director. She raised an eyebrow. Arizona's quite far from Newport. Perhaps we both need a fresh start, he suggested. Somewhere without ghosts. Are you proposing we actually live as husband and wife, Mr. Blackwood? She teased, though her heart raced at the implication. Instead of answering, he reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. Inside lay a simple platinum band set with a single perfect diamond, nothing like the ostentatious ring from their first ceremony. I'm proposing we begin again, he said softly. Not as captor and captive, not as perpetrator and victim, but as partners who chose each other with open eyes and honest hearts. Under the starlit Newport sky, surrounded by flowers that honored the past while embracing the future, Eliza accepted both the ring and the promise it represented. Not a fairy tale ending, but a hard-won beginning.